Michael. So good to have you back. I'm so excited to talk about your new book. It's just so cool. Doing a quick introduction for the one and only Michael Brian, who's Michael Brian Mcdonnell is a best-selling author, award-winning entrepreneur, and celebrity podcaster, philanthropist, and international speaker. His new book is Dear Me, There's a Better Way, which looks at some of the sort of token techniques from the self-help industry. So I've got to ask you, so what made you write this book after your sort of first book, My Introvert Journey to Being Visible?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me on the show again. It's great to chat as always. And the the book actually came out of a bit of frustration, I suppose. It's the Richard Branson equivalent of not being happy with their lines and made his own. I wasn't happy with the self-help industry in a lot of ways because it helps people that don't necessarily need it. You just need a bit of a mental boost for 2 weeks at a time, and it just frustrated me that the people that needed the help and the people that were actually struggling, they weren't truly being solved by what they were reading, the courses they were going on, and it felt like this cycle that was just driven by this feel good factor, this mental boost, this I feel great for 3 weeks and I'm back to reality again. It's like a constant honeymoon experience where you go on a course, you feel great, and then settle back into normality again. And normality isn't good for some of these people, and I didn't feel like they were being helped as well as they could have been, and they just need to be told that your way is the best way. My version of meditation is not going to be yours, and that doesn't mean you're broken, that doesn't mean you're unfixable. That just means that you're different, and everyone's different. We're the same in a lot of ways, but we're also different in a lot of ways as well. So that made me write the book, and it started out as a bit of a rant because I was picking stuff that I wasn't happy with. And I gave it to a couple of my sort of proofreaders, if you will, that, well, this is sounding a little bit like just having a go at the planet. You should probably rethink, like, you're not like shouting at the world with this book. You're supposed to be trying to do something about it as well. So I took a step back and I did start to sort of dial down my hatred of how people were being treated, and that's how the book got a bit easier to write at that point because I was running out of stuff to rant about, if I'm being brutally honest. So I had to I had to find a way of writing the book how I wanted to write it as well. But yeah, that's how the book started. That's how it all came to be. And I'm very glad that the books actually help people because there's a big sort of, you shout at it, but that doesn't mean you're actually helping the situation. And so I had to not just pose the problem with everything, but I had to actually come up with the solutions as well. I couldn't just rant about how meditation's pointless for like 99% of people. Not because it's pointless for 99% of people, but because the way it's taught actually demonizes people that it isn't working for. So it's something that I'm actually grateful that I was able to help people with the book and get good feedback about it, despite it being a bit more of a rant as opposed to a storybook like my first book was.
And actually, would you say that's sort of those are the biggest issues with the self-help industry and self-help books in general?
I think a lot of it comes down to, it's a bit of a cycle that's created when customers don't fully take action on everything, don't find their own way of doing things. So they're in this perpetual, like, dopamine driven, constantly searching, constantly reading, constantly consuming rather than doing something about it, versus, you know, us sort of self-help people wanting to help them
Mm.
at the same time. So we're driven to help and create in this way. But then if we don't help everybody with it, which we never can, we never really do help everybody that we try to help. That's just the nature of it sometimes. But as you get to a point where you start to run out of stuff. You start to run out of, okay, what can I do here? What's wrong here? How can I say the same thing in a different way so that they're actually taking it in and they're actually doing something with it? So it's that sort of spiral that's created by both sides. It's created by both sides of the equation. And as much as I as much as I don't particularly like that, at the same time, it's difficult to break something and start again. So all you can do is chip away at it.
So, would you actually consider your book a self help book? And how do you think it's kind of different?
I think it is a self-help book, but it comes at it from, you need to feel empowered. You need to feel like you have to start somewhere. You have to feel like if it's not perfect straight away, that's okay. You can get there. That's how you've got to feel before you actually take action. Like you never start off perfect. You never start off with the right way. Similar to like playing sport or getting involved in like health and fitness. If you're not good at it, you don't get the full benefit. A lot of people enjoy sport because they're good at it. It's one of the least enjoyable things in the world if you're bad at the thing. So you've got to get to like a skill level whereby you can enjoy it. Like if like one of my sports was basketball, and if I never got it in the hoop, like I'm gonna hate playing. Same with tennis. If I can't hit the ball, I'm never gonna enjoy getting better at this. I'm hopeless. So a lot of people are in that place. They're in that situation where they're not good at any of it, but the process isn't enjoyable enough. They don't see any progress at all, so that they never get there. Like when I first started meditating, I was hopeless and I hated it. Now I can just about manage about 5 minutes, which isn't a lot, but I don't like it. It's not really my thing. I do it because for that rare moment when it does work, I feel pretty good afterwards. And that's my way of doing it. I prefer exercise over meditating. That's one of my main things that as a preference for me. And I'd be miserable if I had to force myself to meditate for an hour. Most miserable experience my entire life. So that's the point really. You've got to find your way and empower yourself and allow yourself to understand that that's okay. No one's gonna hate you just because you do things differently. So that's what I hope the book allows people to see.
That's really interesting because I think you're right in terms of a lot of people kind of think self help books and the industry is some kind of miracle cure, and so I was just wondering, like, why do they sort of think is going to change them overnight when just logically that's almost impossible?
I think there's a desire to be like the success stories, but success stories are a slice of time, similar to like you look at someone's Instagram account and it's all prim and proper, and you realize that they go all the way back to the beginning and it's like random selfies of their food and the cameras all over the place and they're barely even looking at the camera when they're talking. It's when you look at their best and you compare it to your starting point, similar to when I first started any of the things that I do now, any of it, I got into a habit of scrolling back to their first ever versions as well. Like when I first started my podcast, I didn't look at Joe Rogan's show now. I just went all the way back to when he was using his phone and this sort of cave looking thing on YouTube. And I thought, that's his starting point. My starting point's actually better. It looks better. I feel like there's a bit more structure to it than the way Joe did his show originally. Yeah, I'm all right. So you start comparing yourself like for like rather than comparing you with no experience, no skill, no knowledge in a particular thing. Compare it with somebody else in the same situation, in the same sort of step on the ladder, if you will. And people will feel so much better, but they want to get the success story without the work. And I think it does come from we don't know what goes into it. We don't know what goes into the process. So How can you raise the bar so high to, people want results without a whole lot of work? That's quite a high expectation, right?
Yeah, totally. And actually, because it is a cycle, as you said, isn't it? It's a boom and bust cycle. So how do you like kind of stop the sort of dopamine driven of being sucked into the self-help industry like this? How do you stop that cycle?
I think the first thing that you've got to realize is you need to realize how much you do with the information that you're given. Do you read a chapter and take action on it, or do you read the entire book and still don't do anything with it? And then you've got to experiment. You've got to experiment to find out what works. So people don't actually take action. So they're missing things that might work and being driven towards something that might not work. But the only way you find out is by trying.
That's actually true. And actually, I was reading this, like Mark Manson, obviously he's self-help author. And
Yeah.
he was saying that like a lot of self-help books are sort of catered for people with a positive start, as you said as well. So why do you think this is the case, and why aren't they kind of changing this attitude? Like this happened last week with the minimalism thing, it didn't actually consider that some people just don't have anything at all. So it was just like, how do you like kind of cater so that it's actually to like everyone rather than just people who happen to be in a better situation than others?
When I first was on my own self-improvement journey, there was a lot of talk about not trying to convince people, not trying to convince them of their ideologies or their strategies or their mindsets. So someone that's already in a positive space doesn't need any convincing. Someone that's already in a positive frame of mind where just that little tweak can make all the difference. They don't need convincing because they're already motivated, they're already amped up, they're already ready to take action on whatever it is. But there's nothing quite like feeling so bad that you don't actually want to break out of that cycle. If you're in a bad place, you're in a dark place, you don't want to come out of it. You need to have a reason to come out of it. If you don't have one, you're not going to change. So a lot of books are written for the person that's already out of that hole. But aren't we supposed to help people get out of the hole? Is that not the point? Someone that needs to go from like step 10 to step 11, surely that's easier than step 0 to step 1 or step 2. Because people that are in that position don't actually want to come out of it. They don't have the desire there. I know, I've been there. You don't want to be in that. You don't want to come out. The hole is so comfortable. The dark places are so easy because you don't have to do anything to stay there.
Mm,
You
yeah.
don't have to do anything to stay in that position. And unfortunately, it's a combination of the desire of the person mixed with this. I'm not in the business of convincing people to do it. And then
Mm,
they're also less likely to buy books.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So it's a weird situation to be in. And unfortunately, people that struggle, that are in that dark place, they actually feel more broken. Because the
Yeah.
way I tend to explain it is, if you give somebody advice, you're contributing to someone's solution, yeah? It's normally how it tends to work.
Yeah.
You forget that they're contributing to somebody else's problem. If it doesn't work, they go even deeper into the darkness, and they don't even actually want to spend less time trying again because it just repeats that. Rather than having a spiral that goes upwards, you've got the spiral that comes downwards instead. But the advice can be the same. The difference between whether you go up or down in that spiral is whether the advice actually works or not.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, do you think kind of self-help books are kind of only for people with a certain level of privilege?
Privilege. I think it would depend on how low you lower the bar. Are you privileged because you've got clean water? Some people would say yes, some people would say no. I mean, clean water is also not clean. You realize what's actually in the water. Oh, so it's not actually just water. No, there's a lot of chemicals and all kinds of stuff in it already to clean it a lot of the time. So privilege, I guess, depends on your standards. You know, like what's the. I mean, if you've got money to buy a book, then you can buy the book. If you've got the time to implement the book, then yeah, you need to be in that position. You need to be in a position of taking action, but you need to have the time to be able to dedicate the time. If you're busy 24/7, you've got kids, work, family, you don't have a lot of time to do any of the things that you're reading about. And that can sometimes feel like a privilege. It can sometimes be assumed as a privilege. I mean, it sounds a bit silly, but you know, could you wake up an hour earlier to do what you're reading about? Maybe. I mean, is it a privilege to get 8 hours sleep instead of nine, or 5 hours sleep instead of four? I mean, we can argue the toss about that all the time, really. That's not going to go away. Someone's always got more time than you. Someone's always got more energy than you. Someone's always got more money than you.
Mhm.
Even millionaires don't have all the money in the world. So it's it's tough, but I do think we're contributing to this whole. You've got to be in a certain position before the majority of the advice is even worth receiving.
Mm. Yeah, do you know what was really interesting? Like, so Mark Manson did write this article about toxic positivity, and he did actually say, like, it was quite interesting because he was saying, a lot of people don't have that many qualifications to kind of make these assumptions. So, do you think like only mental health professionals should be writing self-help books?
One of the, I mean, I don't want to say it angers me, but it definitely frustrates me when a lot of psychology and psychiatrists and all those things is based on the assumption that the person that they're talking to isn't telling the truth. So if they say they're depressed because of X, Y, and Z, they go, "Oh, well, is that really true?" And it's like, "Yeah, I've told you." So it doesn't help the person if they're being questioned all the time, and that's tough. That's why people are in therapy for years and don't really get anywhere because they're being questioned too often. They lose a sense of self. They lose their belief in themselves, and I don't mean confidence. I mean everything they tell themselves might not be true if they're being questioned all the time. Because if they are being questioned all the time, they start to question themselves all the time. It's kind of like your parents' feedback to you, right? How your parents parented you becomes your inner dialogue, your inner self-talk over the years because you're parenting yourself in your brain just out of repetition as you get older. So do I think that? I think we need to start being more empathetic to the person that's struggling. And a lot of the self-help industry is completely detached from that kind of person. And there is a line, right? So if you think about it as well, Sparky, is self-help has to have a line before it becomes you need to see a psychologist, before it becomes you need to see a psychiatrist, before it becomes you might need some supplements or some kind of extra like drug help, right, to sort of change how your brain's thinking. We're not qualified to work with people in that position. People with a psychology background and master's degrees and the ability to write prescriptions if needed, if the tests are adequate and they come back and say, yep, your brain doesn't quite function in the right way, self-help books aren't also designed for those people. All those people reading self-help books and self-help courses in an attempt to help themselves rather than see a psychiatrist, maybe because they've not got the money to afford a psychiatrist, but they can buy a book. Yeah, they can't speak to someone, can't afford to pay someone to speak to someone, but I can buy a book, or I can go on a course, or I can try to talk myself out of it, right? When there could be something very, very real going on, like seriously going on, and they're trying to self-help their way through it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And we don't factor in that it is a two-way street. Self-help has a limit. Self-help does have a limit. Psychiatry has a limit. Psychologists have a limit, and unfortunately, we don't know. We don't know the person. We can't possibly be inside the person's head, knowing exactly what's going on. So there is an element of the person receiving it
Mm,
also needs to be accountable. This has to work both ways. As much as I'm not a
mm,
fan of the industry because it's trying to help people at the top end of the positivity chain, you know, like, are you in a dark place or are you hyped up, super motivated, let's attack my life? You don't need self-help. You're already good. Why?
mm,
There's no need. There is no need, you know?
mm,
And that's who it's being aimed at, rather than people maybe in the middle of the road that are just a bit demotivated, life's a
mm,
bit meh, right? And they want help to sort of jazz themselves up and start
mm,
taking action again. But you've got people that are in desperate need of more professional help, whether it's diagnosing a condition, whether it's access to pharmaceuticals, right? um, they're trying to also read self-help books as a form of self-diagnosing themselves, and it's not going to help them. It's not going to do the same job. It's not even supposed to do the same job. So it has to work both ways, unfortunately.
such a good point. Such a good point. It's true. I think there's a lot of onus, isn't it, on top of the self-help side of it, but not so much on the person taking it. And so, actually, how do you accept the responsibility of results, even if you end up failing? Because I feel like for me, sometimes I'm not secure enough to deal with that.
It's a very, very difficult fine balance. Very difficult. Um, as much as it is hard, and I have days where it's just like the book isn't going to help you because you need more. You need more than a book can give you. You need more than a course can give you. Some people need like daily calls with a psychologist to make sure that they're on track, and a lot of people simply don't have the resources for that. But the best they can do is read a book, right? Um, it's tough. It's not easy. I have to do the best that I can with what I have. I have to do the best that I can. If it's a call every day, it's a call every day. If it's this is a bit difficult, I can't diagnose you over the call. You need to go and speak to somebody that could maybe diagnose you better than I can, because I'm not a diagnostic person. I can't hear your thoughts and go, yep, you need this. Because then there's a problem with the mental health pharmaceutical industry where they're giving the people a pill for everything. So you can't you can't accept responsibility for everything unless, and this is my caveat to this, unless the consequences are, I don't want to say dangerous, but serious. So if I'm not diagnosing yourself properly and just going through the self-help books, it makes you worse because nothing in the books will help, then you need more. If people are giving you the wrong information and people are forcing tablets down you, and all you need to do is just maybe start an exercise regime, maybe think about what you're eating, hydrate yourself, make sure your body's functioning correctly before you start doing anything else. I'd rather get people to do that rather than go to the doctor and say, I just need a pill for this. So I think, unfortunately, there's actually more responsibility on the consumer to make sure that what they're getting is what they need, which doesn't help us because we're trying to help everybody we can when there are people that we can't help still consuming the same information.
That's exactly it, isn't it? It's so tough. And, the one you said, which is meditation, really tricky because I'm exactly the same, where it's been really hit and miss. I can see how it helps, but it also becomes a bit of a chore in my strategy box.
Mhm.
And I just end up getting more stressed because I know I have to do it. And so, how do you avoid this feeling that it's just another thing on top of like an endless list of things you have to do every day?
Unfortunately, it probably is in the list of things that you have to do every day. I suppose the difference is there are things on that list that aren't a chore, and things on that list that probably are a chore. Um, and that's different from person to person. You know, I see meditation as a chore, but I see the gym as a chore because I've been doing it for so long. I don't enjoy it anymore. I've been doing this for way like half my life now has been spent in the gym, so I don't enjoy it one stretch of the imagination. I hate all of it. All of it. There is not the best thing about going to the gym is the shower afterwards. I don't like the night before getting the kit ready. I don't enjoy the drive. I don't enjoy making my protein shakes. I'm just about stomaching the. It's it. I don't. The only thing I enjoy is the shower afterwards, and then as soon as I've had the shower afterwards, I'm dreading the next day. So
Yeah.
you can't get round to do this because if you're busy, you need a way of organizing everything that you need to do that day.
This is
Uh,
true.
so you can't get around that. You know, whether it feels great, whether it feels horrible, can you change it? Can you make it a bit more fun? Can you gamify it? Can you do guided meditation instead of forcing yourself to not think for 10 minutes?
Mm.
It There's loads of different ways of doing the same thing.
Mhm.
Um, so that I would not so much the strategy, but there's potential to change how you do it.
Gee. Yeah, and this is a thing because I feel like, do you think like when you feel like you're not enough, you can end up pushing yourself to the other extreme of being a perfectionist and then just become really demanding of yourself?
Yes. I also think as well that not enoughness can be handled in a way that means that you're committed to improving yourself. And I think the whole you are enough side, again, it's everyone's got their own sort of way. You know, a lot of people don't feel enough, but how they handle it is more productive and effective than not. I know the way I tend to look at it is if there's less negative consequences to doing the thing or not doing the thing, that's healthier. So you cannot feel enough, and that leads to potentially buying like 40 different beauty products, trying all the different weight loss supplements under the sun, and you know, plastering yourself with makeup every morning just so that you look a bit different, right? And the reason why that's unhealthy is you become addicted to it if you don't do it. You've got the I've got to put my face on. You've got the I don't feel great unless I've got like compression pants on to make my legs look skinny, and it doesn't give you a lot of positive when you do it. It just makes you feel normal, which is weird because you do so much just to feel normal. But when you stop doing it, you feel horrible. That's not as healthy as okay, I don't feel enough. What can I dedicate myself to that requires me to improve? It could be a job, it could be fitness, it could be some kind of competition. You might want to climb Everest, right? And in order to do that, you've got to be fit, healthy, contend with lack of oxygen. Certain types of training work better for that. That's healthier than other things that you might want to beat yourself up with. So it's it, again, it comes back to what I said about how you do it. The problem's there. There's so few people that feel good enough all the time. So few people. Because, when you're out for a walk somewhere, someone walks quicker than you find yourself walking a bit quicker because you compare yourself to them and they're walking
Mhm.
and you go, well, I've got to speed up then, you know? Or it's like if someone gets onto the treadmill next to me, I'm going to try and win. I don't know them, but they're next to me. Therefore, we're having a race, and that's me being competitive. But it's something that we deal with almost all the time. We deal with the comparison all the time. You can't say you feel good enough all the time, but then not like how you look on pictures or make sure the angle's just right for Instagram or it's it becomes a double standard across the board. If you think one way about something, but don't look at other areas where that shows up. I'm okay with like being a bit more polished on certain social medias. I'm okay with spending a bit longer editing my show because I want it to be good. Not There's a difference between comparing yourself in a bad way and wanting it to be good. So you set standards for you. There's nothing wrong with high standards as long
Mm,
as not making yourself unhappy by
mm,
those standards. Because you don't
mm.
have standards unless you have them. So yeah, it's that sort of like if you never set a high standard, you never get to the high standard. But then are you doing it for you or are you doing it for somebody else?
Mm, that's a good point. And the other aspect, which I thought was really interesting, especially because it's so true, which is the negative self voice, like the negative voices that you just constantly in your head. And especially when you're starting to achieve your goal. So, how do you actually stop that from happening?
I don't think we do. And I say that as someone that's making very good progress in other areas of my life, and I still can't cook, by the way. So that's something I'm still trying to figure out. Um, it's difficult. I think I don't think it goes away, but I think we learn to handle it, and we learn to not allow it to control us. It's kind of how it's like you've got the disconnect between the self talk, what you do about the self talk, and you choose how you handle it. So that's the difference. Ultimately, is your ability to choose, your ability to have a say, and how much control you have over that. I mean, control is a dangerous word to use. That's why I like the word choice, right? I think freedom minded is better than control. It seems a bit more fluid, it's a bit healthier because trying to control something you can't control makes you very unhappy. And if you allow things to change, you're very fluid with how the process goes, you feel better because you don't hold on to things as much. You don't force things as much. You don't worry as much all the time. And I am a worrier, unfortunately. So I can attest to some of the ways that people try to put themselves in situations that make things harder than they could be. Sometimes it's a pride thing. You know, you make things difficult so that when you overcome it, you feel better than if you made it easier to begin with. Because if you overcome something that's easy, you don't feel like you have a reason to feel good because it was easy. So you make it difficult to set yourself up to succeed and feel great because you made it so hard and yet you managed it rather than, well, it could be easy. You just don't have the same feel good factor because you made it easy rather than
Mm,
to be difficult and then overcoming it. It's like, well, I'd rather have an easier life and still achieve the same things. I don't understand why people have this pride element around things, you know, to make themselves feel good. When you say don't leave it, like if the journey's longer, achieving things feels good. It feels better if the journey takes longer. If you know what I
mm,
mean. But the more you endure, the better you feel at the end. Because you've got to be okay with it being hard then, because you can't have it both ways. You can't want the challenge, want the struggle because you feel great at the end, and then go, oh, but I'm struggling right now. Like, yeah,
mm,
you're not at the end yet. You're not there. So you're in the struggling part, and that's okay because you feel great at the end. You know, sometimes people, similar to what we said before, people want things quicker than they actually get them. And when
mm,
they're in a struggling position, they don't quite click to the idea that, well, when you do get to the other end, you'll feel better because you're struggling now.
mm. Now, how would you live day to day without setting any goals?
I think I mean, would the goals be short term or long term?
I guess if it's day to day, I'm assuming it will also be short term.
Okay.
Mm,
It does make a difference because if your goal is 10 years, you've got 10 years.
mm,
uh, what you do in year one may or may not actually need to be structured a certain way to get there. You've still got 9 years. You can have a very, very bad 4 years, an amazing 6 years, and like 2 years good, 1 year bad, 3 years good, 4 years bad, and you still get there. So I think the longer term the goal is, the more fluid you can afford to be, and the more fluid you probably need to be, because you learn every time you go through a struggle, you learn something. Every time something doesn't work out, you learn something. Now, like 9 years of struggle, and the 10th year is the best one ever because of what you've learned over those 9 years. If it's a daily thing and you're putting the expectations on yourself, there are people out there, and I know a few of them. I sometimes am that way. If I have deadlines to meet, is if you set the high bar, you will achieve more than if you set the low bar. Because there's I think there's a regression to the mean or something. So most people regress to the mean over the long term, right? It's kind of like your normal is like the mean side of things. So you have like days where you go, yeah, you're killing it. Other days where you don't get out of bed. Generally, it evens out in the middle somewhere. And sometimes we have to allow for that. Is there a way you can increase your mean? Yeah, there are ways you can increase your normal level. I mean, how do you live without goals? I think as long as you're making progress in something, doesn't matter what it is, you feel better than if you're not. So then you've got to look at, okay, how much progress do you need to make in order to feel happy? Some people have a very high bar for that. And I mean, like, you're never going to achieve it. So you're perpetually unhappy because of the standards that you set yourself. There are people that live like that, people that live like that all the time. You set the standards so high, they try their best, but it's never going to happen. And they're always unhappy. Now, do you know ahead of time? No, unfortunately not. You don't know ahead of time. So you set the goal with the assumption that you will do enough. We very rarely set a goal and go, well, that's never going to happen. So we have this goal of, let's say we want to make a certain amount of money today in order to pay for whatever it is. Money is normally an easy one to look at. Then you've got to ask yourself, okay, well, what's the plan for that today? Like, can I do it? Do I have the time to do it? If you're spending all your time like training people, let's say you're educating people, you're not doing anything that will bring in sales directly, it's less likely to happen just because of what's in the calendar that day. So do you set the expectation knowing that it's not going to happen, like ever? Or do you set a lower bar that you can gradually increase over time once you've got a bit more faith in yourself and a bit more trust in your abilities, and then you naturally increase anyway? It's a tough question to ask because I'm one of those people where I put myself in the crazy situations and I always seem to find a way to make it work. I always seem to find a way, whether I'm up an hour earlier to do some homework, whether I go to bed late because my brain's firing, I've got to make all these tons of notes before I go and do something. I tend to do that intuitively. My brain goes, what's got to happen in order for me to do that? If that's the late nights and early mornings, that's the late nights and early mornings. My brain automatically keeps me awake longer and wakes me up earlier in tune with what I need to do. So that's how I tend to do it. I'm one of those set the standards first. Oh, sorry about that. We've got thunder. Got thunder outside. We've got thunder. Sorry about that.
Wow.
We've just got thunder. But yeah, a lot of people struggle to do that. That's not a natural thing. Not everybody can work like that. So you've got to figure out how you work best. That's number one. Then you've got to say, right, am I setting myself up to fail? Do I have any idea whether I can achieve this today or not? Do I have any clue on whether, because some people can, right? Some people have achieved things in the past and they go, yeah, that's reasonable. Bit of a stretch, but I can manage it. If you don't have that, if you can't have that conversation, you're always going to struggle.
Definitely. And I actually wanted to ask, final words, which is what would be your kind of final words for the self-help industry right now for it to change?
I think the self-help industry has to be a bit more specific with what their resources are for, who their resources are for. So mine is for the industry as a whole, people that are sick and tired of being told how to think, being told how to act, being told how to feel, how they should feel, despite it not being how they actually feel. So there's a big disconnect between being told how to live without it being what's right for them. So that's what that book's for. If it's for people that are depressed, then say it, so that the wrong people are picking up the book and going, this one must be for me. It's got empower your whatever it is. So I think they need to be a bit more specific about what their resources, their courses, their events. They need to be clear with who it's for. Because it's not for everybody. And there are psychiatrists that write books for people that are in desperate need of things. And they're picking up the wrong books. They're going on the wrong courses because it's not specific enough. It's not tailored enough. So you're bringing the wrong people in.
Yeah, so true. Thank you, Mike, so much. I really appreciate it because it's so true. It's something that needed to be done, critical approach into the industry because there are areas where it definitely needs change. So yeah, so well done for writing this book. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks again for having me on.